Welcome back, and what a delight to have with us today Joel Pollak. He is an editor with Breitbart News Network and the author of a very interesting book, See No Evil, 19 Hard Truths the Left Cannot Handle or Can't Handle. So, Joel, good to see you. How you doing, my friend?
Good to be with you. I'm fine. How are you?
Fine, thank you. Well, let's get into this a little bit. You want to talk about Hillary's convention speech. What did you think of it?
Well, you know, I have actually been thinking about it again this morning, as a matter of fact. It was largely unremarkable, but there's one line. In fact, if I can pull it up as I'm speaking with you, there was one line that stuck with me, and it's quite remarkable. It's a line that she said. I'm going to paraphrase it because I don't have it here in front of me. But she said that she would work not just for her voters, but for people who didn't vote for her. And I think that's important. You know, Barack Obama doesn't say that. He says something similar but has an opposite meaning. He says that, in 2014 at least, he said he represents the people who didn't vote, which is kind of a sore loser's way of saying, I may have lost the election, but I still run the country. And that's not what she's saying. What she's saying is, here's the line, I pulled it up. She will be a president for Democrats, Republicans, and Independents, for those who vote for me and those who don't. Nobody believes that. She's extremely partisan, and her followers are just itching to use what they now perceive to be a likely Trump defeat, given the poll numbers, to wipe out the conservative movement. I mean, that's their goal. They're stating it on social media. In today's New York Times, for example, they want to absolutely annihilate the movement that Trump built, not just Trump himself. So nobody believes Clinton, but it's the kind of thing you have to say as a president. And I think part of the reason Trump's in trouble right now is it's the kind of thing he doesn't say. I mean, he's said similar things in the past, but the essence of the Khan affair was that Trump got into a fight with a voter, never mind if it's a Gold Star family or whatever, but somebody challenged him. And as a politician, you really just need to roll with that. You can't be seen to be on the side against voters or against anybody. You have to represent even people who disagree with you, who challenge you, who don't like you. And I don't know that Clinton has that in her heart, but she had it on the page. So I think that Trump's got to get back there. Otherwise, it's going to get pretty ugly in November.
Yeah. I think what we're seeing now is it's been a horrible week for Trump. And all of his advisors and those around him say he's got to get back on message. And the message is he's running against Hillary Clinton, not all of these other people. So we'll see if next week is a different week for him. Let's get into your book a little bit, Joel, talking about 19 hard truths the left can't handle. On the other hand, the left believes in some absolute lies as truth, right?
Yes, they believe certain things to be true. Or more to the point, they believe true things to be untrue, or act as if certain truths are untrue, and they try to suppress those truths from entering the discussion. In the Khan affair, since we're talking about it, the most important truth they've suppressed is the connection between terrorism and radical Islam. That connection is the very reason for Trump's immigration policy, which might be a bad policy or a good policy, but is at least motivated by the desire to stop terrorists from coming to the United States. And there's a recognition that terrorists move within the population of Muslim immigrants to the United States. And we've seen this. There are homegrown Muslim terrorists in the United States, but there's often a foreign inspiration or an imam from overseas who brings radicalism with him. So that's the essence of Trump's contention. That's what the left denies. And Khan himself went on CNN on Sunday and said that terror has nothing to do with Islam. Well, that's just ridiculous. But that's something the left has been telling itself. It's actually the official policy of the Obama administration, and it's the platform of the Clinton campaign, that they do not recognize radical Islam. Because they do not recognize it, they can't fight it either militarily or ideologically. And because they can't fight it militarily or ideologically properly, they're losing to it, and they're perpetuating it. In fact, the terrorists think that the fact that we won't name them is not only funny, but is actually a sign that they're winning. So this is actually a pretty serious issue. It's also something that has led to or contributed to terror in this country, because political correctness has, in several cases, prevented people from reporting suspicious activity to authorities. We know in San Bernardino, for example, a neighbor of the terrorists, who then went on and killed almost 24 people, saw suspicious activity at the home next door, but didn't say anything because he was afraid that he would be accused of racial profiling. So we have truths the left wants to suppress. In that particular case, with deadly results. And the reason they want to suppress it is because their own ideas don't hold water. What is the left's idea in this matter? The left's idea is that multiculturalism works. What is multiculturalism? It's something different from the melting pot. The old melting pot idea was that everybody comes to America and becomes American. The multicultural idea is you come to America and you retain more or less your sense of who you are and your old norms. You simply go with the system we have here. You accommodate to the laws and civil restraints, but you basically maintain your own separate social identity, and that's a failure. And the reason it's a failure is because some of those identities are profoundly at odds with the civic project of the United States, and radical Islam is one of them. And we're not in the situation Europe is in, where they have enclaves that are forever separated from European society by choice, not by law and not by segregation, but by choice. The simply overwhelming number of immigrants has partly led to that. We are not quite at the ghettoizing of immigrant populations in this country, but we have allowed a situation to develop where we're not dealing with some of the radicalism in these communities. You have, for example, in Minnesota, Somali Americans who are seeing a large number of their youth disappearing overseas to fight for ISIS or to marry, to be ISIS brides in some cases. This is something that we're not grappling with. And the left doesn't want to acknowledge the failure of the multicultural project, so it pretends it isn't failing. It pretends that radical Islam is not the problem. It pretends that Islam itself doesn't have problems, but there are massive problems. There are social problems. There are cultural problems. The Syrian refugee crisis is another example. Why are these refugees not being resettled in the Middle East, where there's some cultural affinity, where there's religious commonality, where there's lots of money to do the resettlement, where people could be moved more easily back to their homes once the war in Syria ends? No, they're being settled in the West. Now, maybe some of them will be great workers and citizens and so forth. Maybe some of them are the kind of people we would have loved to have had anyway as neighbors and friends and compatriots. But there's no doubt that the cultural dislocation between some of these refugee populations and the host societies to which they're moving is extreme. Look what happened in Germany over New Year's with bands of men groping and assaulting women in Cologne and other places. I mean, this is something that we haven't dealt with because in these societies, women are covered up and women are subordinate. And you add the sudden availability of women who are not completely covered or who are liberated in their own choices. You couple that with the lingering misogyny of some of these cultural groups, and you've got a powder keg. It's not hysteria to say this is a real problem. So I think that we have a debate that's happening partly because Trump has taken the positions he's had. And one of the attractions of Trump's candidacy is he punctures the left's effort to hide truth from the public. I do take on Donald Trump in my book a little bit because I think he has some problems with truth of his own. He's made some claims that just don't hold up and he doesn't seem to mind. And what I worry about on both sides is the notion of a dialogue that is completely devoid of any responsibility to tell the truth. We've seen that on the left, certainly, for many years. We're starting to see the right respond with it a little bit. And I think that we need to get everybody to come back to a dialogue that is based in truth, that has reality, has a goal and a reference point. And that's the only way to have a democratic dialogue that makes any sense or has any success. Because unless you can agree that reality is the standard, and you can agree that it's okay to be wrong as long as you acknowledge reality, as long as you acknowledge your mistakes, you're not going to have a dialogue. You're going to have a bunch of people shouting at each other, which is basically what we have in America today.
Let me jump in here, Joel, because you put a lot on the table here. First of all, back to multiculturalism just for a moment. We know that it's a failure. And also because it's a failure, pluralism's a failure. We're seeing that. We got that in the faith community. But the one question that comes out of this, in spite of the lies of the left, a lot of people believe them. Doesn't that tell you more of a mood problem in the country? Because on the other side, whether you like or dislike Trump, he represents a mood change in the country. So why are so many people drawn to the left, even though their platform doesn't hold water?
Well, because people don't see what the platform is. And that was part of the goal in my book, is to shine a light on what the left actually believes. So, for example, take minimum wage. I have a chapter on minimum wage. that's an issue where you can have a real debate about whether minimum wages hurt jobs or don't hurt jobs. There's some evidence they do, and if you change your assumptions, there's some evidence that they don't. But the logic that you have to admit is that at some point the minimum wage will hurt jobs. Maybe $15 an hour doesn't hurt every job. Maybe in the restaurant industry we've seen evidence that it does. But okay, for argument's sake, let's say that it doesn't hurt at $15 an hour. Well, why should it only be $15 an hour then? Why not 30? Why not 50? In fact, why not $500 an hour? Why shouldn't we pay people $500 an hour, the same that lawyers earn and the same that doctors and actors earn? I mean, some of these jobs are very important. It's very important to have clean schools. Janitors, if they weren't cleaning the schools, kids would be getting sick. And why don't we pay them $500 an hour? Well, the answer is we can't afford to pay them $500 an hour. And if we paid them $500 an hour, there would be fewer of them. We'd have to automate more of what they do. And so we'd have higher unemployment. Well, even someone on the left would have to admit that. So once you've admitted the internal logic of supply and demand, then you realize the left position is ridiculous, that raising the minimum wage isn't simply a matter of decreeing what wages should be. You have to have some kind of calibration in wages with what the market supply and demand are. And the market is actually a very good way of determining what the wage should be. That's why so many people earn far more than the minimum wage. Very few people earn the minimum wage because most people's value is much higher and their productivity is higher. The market has told us the people who earn minimum wage tend to be high school students. They tend to be people taking part-time jobs alongside of whatever else it is they're doing. And what you see here is that the left has an absurd premise, which is you can simply raise wages and make people richer. The left knows it's absurd. If you challenge them with that logic, they will admit it's absurd, but then they'll come back and say, well, $15 is sort of the happy medium. And there's no evidence for it. I mean, they've just decided that it has to be 15, where, a few years ago, it was $7.25. A few years ago, Obama said, let's raise it to 9. The year after, he said 10. And now he's saying 15 because that's what the activists have decided they want. But there's no rhyme or reason to it. So the way to show people that the left's agenda is faulty is just to tell them what it is. If the left's agenda is to constantly raise wages, regardless of the consequences for unemployment, people are going to reject that.
Interesting. Do you think that after 8 years of extreme left is one of the reasons that the pushback of anti-establishment and politicians is the reason why maybe Trump or whoever the nominee would be is doing so well?
Well, I think the left is divided. I think there are people on the left who associate their ideology with being in power. It's important to be in power in order to make the kinds of radical changes that you want to see made. And then there are people on the left, you see them more in the Bernie Sanders camp, who associate being in the left with certain principles. And the principles are important regardless of the power you wield. For example, not going to war is a left-wing principle. I talk about that in my book as well. And you see there's a division on the left, and it was very visible at the Democratic National Convention between those two wings. And the Clinton wing is very much the former, and the Sanders wing is the latter. And the Clinton wing suppressed the latter. They silenced the Bernie Sanders supporters. They took away their signs, or they wouldn't let them into parts of the arena. And so the Sanders people walked out. And I don't know that that rift is going to be healed in this election. What holds the Democratic Party together, the glue in a sense, is shared opposition to Trump and hatred and fear of the Republican Party. So the left-wing grassroots is anti-establishment, but is willing probably to put that aside because of the threat of Donald Trump. But on both sides in this election, Republican and Democrat, you've seen some anti-establishment fervor. And some of it's driven by the same issues, people who feel dislocated by trade. I'm a free trader, but there are people who have not been able to pick up their lives and move on when jobs disappear. And I think the system as a whole has failed to acknowledge that. So you see people on the left and the right with different solutions. The left wants more redistribution. The right wants more free markets. But basically, there's this unified opposition to the Trans-Pacific Partnership right now, partly because of the way it happened, sort of being shoved down our throats. But there's an anti-establishment streak on both sides. And I think that it's not going to go away, regardless of the election result.
Interesting. By the way, where can they get your book? Is it at Amazon now?
Yes, it's at Amazon.com, and it's available from Regnery Publishing. See No Evil is the name of the book.
Okay, there it is. See No Evil, 19 Hard Truths the Left Can't Handle. There's a picture of it there on the screen. You may want to check that out. All right, so I wish I had you for a long time, but I'm running out of time here. Where do you think this election's going? I mean, Trump's had a bad week, but he's still representing a movement that is anti-liberal. Where do you think this election's going?
Well, it's hard to say. I mean, anything could happen. Today, I feel like it's very likely Hillary Clinton will win. I have felt that way almost the entire time. I think it's been clear that she was going to enjoy the support of the media. She didn't really make much of a case for herself at the convention, except that she's the historic candidacy, the first female candidate of a major party. And given the way people voted for Obama, it was pretty clear that was going to be enough, that it would take something pretty extraordinary to dislodge her from being the favorite. And that nearly happened with the FBI investigating her over her emails. She wasn't indicted. She should have been. Even if she wasn't indicted, the fact that she had behaved with extreme recklessness ought to have been enough to sink her candidacy. Who knows, may still happen. There may be more there. The debates are still to come. We don't know. I think what's clear is that there's a crisis right now of confidence in Donald Trump's leadership that he needs to address. He still has time to address it. It's early August. But, you know, these elections are basically decided by mid-September. So he only has a few weeks to sort this out. And I think he's lost the opportunity to convince some in the left wing to cross over and support him who hadn't already. The question is whether he'll hold enough of his coalition together. You know, he has to be presidential. And I don't think there's anything irrational about his behavior. In fact, it's entirely consistent. Trump has always responded to an attack on him with an attack in kind, which is why when the cons criticized him, he fired back. He's always done that regardless of who does it. And that's probably a practice he's developed and honed in the construction industry, where, you know, that's how you get things done, and that's how you get people to cooperate with you. And when they're nice to you, you're nice to them, and when they're mean to you, you retaliate. And that's just been his mode. And maybe that's good in a president when we have global threats and we struggle to develop our deterrent against terror with a smaller military, smaller Navy in particular than we had before. But the challenge, of course, in politics is building support among people who have diverse views and interests and who may not even like you. You've got to bring them on board on certain issues, and you have to allow them room to disagree. And if every small disagreement becomes the occasion for a massive retaliatory attack, you're going to alienate everybody. It makes the task of governing difficult. And I think that's what this is really about more than anything else. It's really a test of Mr. Trump's ability to govern. He passed the first test with flying colors. I think selecting Mike Pence as a running mate was an excellent choice, far better than Hillary Clinton's choice, Tim Kaine. I mean, Kaine is basically a non-entity. But then Trump, when handed this...
Yeah, sorry to step on you. I got to go. But let me just say to our viewers, you can go to Amazon and see the book, or pick up the book, See No Evil, 19 Hard Truths the Left Can't Handle. Check it out. And, of course, he's also a contributor to Breitbart.com. You can check out some of his writings there. Thanks, Joel. Fascinating. Maybe we can connect again, okay?
Good to be with you.
All right, good to be with you. All right, we'll see you next time on Focus Today.
I'm Paulina Leiser, producer of Focus Today. Thank you for watching this video, and make sure to check our other videos at thedove.us.